I watched my husband's face turn purple as he choked on the emergency room doctor's words. Food poisoning, severe malnutrition. Mrs. Chen, how long has your diet been this restricted? I smiled sweetly from my hospital bed, the IV drip slowly rehydrating my deliberately weakened body. Oh, about 6 months, doctor. You see, my husband told me my cooking was terrible, so I stopped making meals entirely. I've been eating plain rice and vegetables. He's been dining out every night. Marcus's eyes went wide with panic. The doctor's expression shifted from concern to cold assessment as he looked between us. Mr. Chen, your wife is 20 pounds underweight and showing signs of chronic stress-related illness. I'm required to file a report. That was 3 days ago. 3 days since I'd executed the opening move in my new life. The life where I remembered everything from before. Let me take you back to where this really began. Not to this hospital room with its sterile sheets and Marcus's panicked face, but to a kitchen 7 years from now, in my first life, where I would die choking on my own blood while cooking my husband's favorite meal. I was 23 when I married Marcus Chen, and I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. He was 30, successful, handsome, and he'd chosen me, plain little Julie Jiang from the restaurant district, daughter of a small-town chef, nothing special except my ability to recreate any dish I'd ever tasted. My mother had died when I was 16, leaving me with her recipe books and her gift. My father remarried quickly, too quickly, to a woman named Patricia who brought her daughter Vivian into our home. Vivian was everything I wasn't: confident, beautiful, ambitious. Patricia made it clear that their family was the priority now. My father, weak-willed and eager to please his new wife, went along with everything. When Marcus started coming to my father's restaurant, I was working as a line cook to pay for community college. He was there for a business dinner, and he sent back his entree 3 times. The chef was ready to refuse service, but I intervened. I tasted the dish, identified what was wrong, and personally prepared a new version. He asked to meet the chef. When he found out it was me, just a girl in a grease-stained apron, he'd been charmed, or so I thought. We dated for 8 months. He took me to expensive restaurants, and I'd taste everything, memorizing flavors and techniques. Then I'd recreate the dishes at home, better than the originals. He loved it. He loved me, I thought. Patricia and Vivian attended our wedding, smiling their plastic smiles. My father gave me away with tears in his eyes. Guilty tears, I realize now. After the wedding, Marcus suggested I quit my job. I make enough for both of us, he'd said. Focus on making our home perfect. So I did. I cooked elaborate meals every night. His favorite was a dish I'd created just for him, braised short ribs with a star. Anise and wine reduction served over creamy polenta with roasted bone marrow on the side. It took 4 hours to prepare properly. I made it every Friday without fail for 7 years. 7 years of cooking, cleaning, being the perfect wife. 7 years of watching him come home later and later. 7 years of Facebook photos I wasn't tagged in, perfume I didn't wear, and a growing coldness in his eyes. The night I died, my first death, I was preparing his favorite meal. It was our anniversary, though he'd forgotten. Again. I'd spent the entire day on the dinner, using the last of my grocery budget for the expensive ingredients. Vivian came by that afternoon. She'd become a regular visitor, always friendly, always helpful. "You look tired, Julie," she'd said, perching on my kitchen counter. "Maybe I should tell you the truth. Marcus and I have been seeing each other for 3 years." I'd dropped the knife I was holding. She smiled, that beautiful, cruel smile. "Actually, we started dating before your wedding. He came to me for advice on how to lock you down. Turns out he wanted a live-in chef and maid, not a wife. But you were so perfect at it, so eager to please. We thought, why not let you keep doing it?" My hands shook as I picked up the knife. "That's not true. Patricia and I have been helping him hide everything. The separate bank accounts, the credit cards, the apartment he rents for us. Your father knows too. He thinks you're better off staying married to a successful man even if he doesn't love you. Better than being alone like your pathetic mother." She laughed, checking her phone. "Marcus is on his way home now, actually. I told him to finally ask you for a divorce tonight. We're tired of sneaking around. He's going to give you nothing, by the way. No money, no house. The prenup you signed? Remember, the one Patricia witnessed? She's a notary. She made sure it was ironclad. Everything belongs to Marcus. The room spun. 7 years. 7 years of my life, wasted on a lie. Vivian hopped off the counter. Anyway, I should go. Enjoy your last dinner together. She paused at the door. Oh, and Julie, he always said your cooking was just okay. You tried too hard. It was desperate. She left. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the ingredients for his favorite meal, and something inside me broke. I don't remember making the conscious decision. I just remember the gas stove, the special wine for the reduction, and drinking directly from the bottle as I cooked. Drinking and drinking until the kitchen blurred. I must have turned back to the stove too quickly. Must have slipped on the wine I'd spilled. The pot of boiling reduction tipped, and 400-degree liquid poured down my throat as I fell, screaming. I died in my kitchen, in my beautiful home that wasn't mine, preparing the favorite meal of a man who'd never loved me. And then I woke up. I woke up in my old bedroom at my father's house, in a twin bed I hadn't slept in for years. The alarm clock read 6:47 a.m. The date on my phone made my heart stop. It was the morning of my first date with Marcus. I sat up slowly, my throat aching with phantom burns that weren't there. My hands were smooth, unscarred by years of kitchen work. I was 22 years old again. For 3 days, I thought I was losing my mind. I watched myself move through routines I remembered, conversations I'd had before. Patricia made passive-aggressive comments about my clothes. Vivian borrowed money she'd never return. My father pretended not to notice. And then Marcus walked into the restaurant. I watched him send back his entree once, twice. The third time, the chef started toward his table, angry. This was where I'd stepped in before, where I'd changed my life, ruined my life. I stopped the chef. I'll fix it, I said. But this time I didn't fix it. I made it worse. Deliberately oversalted, slightly burnt, plated carelessly. The chef looked at it in horror. What are you doing? Trust me, I said, and sent it out. Marcus sent it back immediately with a scathing complaint. The manager comped his entire table's meal and asked him to leave. I watched from the kitchen window as he left, furious and humiliated. That was my first change, my first act of rebellion against destiny. I waited for reality to collapse, for the universe to correct itself. But nothing happened. I went to work the next day. Marcus never came back. My life continued, but different now. I spent 2 weeks testing my new reality. I was really here, really alive again, with all my memories intact. I knew everything that was coming. Patricia's manipulations, Vivian's betrayals, my father's weakness, and Marcus's cruelty. Knowledge is power, they say, but knowledge with time to plan, that's revenge. 3 months after my first date with Marcus never happened, I met him again at a food industry conference. I'd used my savings to attend, networking aggressively with restaurant owners and food critics. I'd started a blog documenting my recipe experiments, using my knowledge of future food trends to go viral quickly. Marcus was there representing his family's investment firm. They specialized in restaurant acquisitions, something I'd never known in my first life when I'd been too busy cooking to ask about his work. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? In my first life, I'd been dressed in a stained apron, desperate and eager to please. Now I wore a professional dress, spoke confidently about the industry, and most importantly, I walked away from our conversation first. He followed me. Over the next month, he pursued me aggressively. Dinner invitations, flowers sent to my father's restaurant, tickets to exclusive food events. I accepted selectively, kept him at arm's length, and never, not once, offered to cook for him. I keep my professional and personal lives separate, I told him with a sweet smile. I cook for money, not for fun. It drove him crazy. In my first life, I'd been so eager to please, cooking elaborate meals on our second date. Now, when we went to restaurants, I critiqued the food professionally and refused to share my own techniques. You're different from other women, he said one night, frustrated. You're challenging. Good, I replied. I'd hate to be boring. Vivian tried to interfere. She started showing up at events where she knew Marcus would be, dressed to kill, flirting obviously. But I'd done my research this time. I knew Marcus's type, and it wasn't actually the beautiful, confident woman he'd had his affair with before. It was the chase, the conquest, the thing he couldn't have. In my first life, I'd been too easy. I'd given him everything before he'd earned it. This time, I made him work. 6 months into our new relationship, he proposed. I said no. Why? He was genuinely shocked. In his world, women didn't refuse Marcus Chen. Because I don't know if I trust you, I said simply. And I won't marry someone I don't trust. I let him sweat for 3 months. In that time, I did my real work. I hired a private investigator, a good one, expensive. I had him dig into Marcus's business and personal life, into Patricia and Vivian's backgrounds, into my father's finances. What I found was worse than I'd remembered. Patricia had been systematically stealing from my father's restaurant for years, funneling money into accounts under Vivian's name. They'd planned to bankrupt the business, buy it for pennies, and flip it for profit. My father had signed documents he didn't understand, trusting his wife. Marcus's investment firm had been involved in several predatory acquisitions, targeting family restaurants and then closing them to sell the real estate. One of their upcoming targets? My father's restaurant. And Vivian? She'd been Marcus's on and off girlfriend since college. They'd never really broken up. Patricia had encouraged the relationship, seeing Marcus as a useful business connection. In my first life, I'd been a pawn in their game. A convenient cover story for Marcus, a source of free labor, and a distraction for my father while they robbed him blind. Not this time. I accepted Marcus's second proposal with conditions. I want a prenup, I told him, one that protects both of us fairly. He was surprised but agreed, probably thinking I had nothing worth protecting. His lawyer drew up the first draft, the same terrible prenup from my first life. I rejected it. Get your own lawyer, Marcus suggested, annoyed. I will, I said sweetly. I hired the best divorce attorney in the state, a woman who specialized in high net worth cases. Together, we crafted a prenup that looked standard but had very specific clauses about infidelity, hidden assets, and business dealings, and a clause requiring full financial disclosure during marriage, updated quarterly. Marcus's lawyer approved it without reading carefully. After all, what assets did a restaurant line cook have? They didn't know about the food blog that was now generating significant income, the cookbook deal I'd just signed with a major publisher, the investors I'd been courting for my own restaurant concept. We married quietly, no big wedding this time. I insisted on a small ceremony, claiming I wanted to save money for our future. Patricia and Vivian looked disappointed. They'd probably planned to use the wedding to network. The night of our wedding, Marcus expected me to cook his favorite meal. I'd dropped hints about it during our engagement, watching his anticipation grow. Instead, I ordered pizza. I'm too tired, I said with a yawn. We can cook together this weekend. The weekend came. I was busy with work, and the next weekend, and the next. I thought you loved cooking, Marcus said after a month of takeout and simple meals. I love cooking professionally, I corrected. It's my job. When I come home, I want to relax. His face tightened. But you could make something special sometimes, right? Like that short rib dish you mentioned? Maybe, I said vaguely. When I have time. I never had time. Instead, I threw myself into my career. My cookbook launched 3 months after our wedding and became a surprise bestseller. My blog grew. Restaurants started reaching out for consulting work. I was building something, building myself, and Marcus couldn't control it. The financial disclosures started coming in as required by our prenup. That's when I saw it. The separate accounts, the hidden investments, the apartment lease he hadn't mentioned. I said nothing. I documented everything. 6 months into our marriage, Vivian made her move. She started coming by the house when Marcus was home, dressed provocatively, bringing wine. I pretended not to notice, but I set up security cameras throughout the house. I caught them on video within a week. Nothing explicit, Marcus was too smart for that, but enough. Intimate conversations, her hand on his arm, him not pulling away. I still said nothing. Instead, I started cooking. Not for Marcus, never for Marcus, but for myself. I began hosting dinner parties, inviting food critics, restaurant owners, investors, people who mattered in my industry. I served elaborate meals, showed off my skills, and networked aggressively. Marcus hated it. "You'll cook for strangers, but not for your husband?" he demanded after one particularly successful dinner party. "They appreciate it," I said simply. "They understand what goes into a meal like this." "I'd appreciate it. Would you?" I met his eyes. "Tell me, Marcus, what's your favorite meal?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know. He'd told me in my first life, guided me to create that elaborate short rib dish. But in this life, I'd never asked, and he'd never volunteered. "That's what I thought," I said softly. The trap was set. Now I just needed to wait for them to walk into it. My father's restaurant was struggling. Patricia was making sure of that. She'd fired key staff, changed suppliers to more expensive options, and made upgrades that drained the budget. My father, weak and in love, let it happen. Marcus's firm approached him with an acquisition offer. Low, predatory, but presented as a rescue. "Your daughter's husband wants to help," Patricia told my father. "You should accept." I intervened. "I'll buy the restaurant," I told my father. "Let me save it." "You don't have that kind of money," he said sadly. "Actually, I do." I showed him my bank statements, the cookbook royalties, the consulting fees, the blog revenue, and the investors I'd secured, people who believed in my vision for a new kind of restaurant. "Julie, honey," Patricia said in that saccharine voice I'd learned to hate, "this is a business decision. Marcus's firm can offer stability. Your little projects are very nice, but this is the real world." "The real world," I repeated. "Right." I turned to my father. "Dad, has Patricia shown you the account statements for the restaurant? The real ones?" His face went pale. "What do you mean?" I laid out the evidence. Every stolen dollar, every fraudulent vendor charge, every piece of equipment Patricia had purchased and then sold privately. 3 years of theft, documented and undeniable. That's ridiculous," Patricia sputtered. "She's lying." "I have bank records," I said calmly, "receipts, emails, Vivian's account information showing where the money went." I looked at my father. "They've been stealing from you for years. They were going to bankrupt you, let Marcus's firm buy the restaurant for nothing, and then flip it. You'd get pennies. They'd make millions." My father looked at his wife. "Patricia?" Her face crumbled, not with guilt, but with fury at being caught. "This is all Vivian's fault," she shrieked. "She needed the money for her business ideas. I was just helping my daughter." "By destroying mine?" My father's voice was cold. I'd never heard that tone from him before. Patricia realized her mistake too late. She tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. My father called the police that night. Patricia and Vivian were arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Marcus found out when his firm's legal team called. The restaurant acquisition was dead. I'd already purchased it from my father for fair market value using my investors' money. And with Patricia and Vivian facing criminal charges, their connection to Marcus's firm was a liability. "Did you know," I asked him that night, "about what they were doing?" "No," he lied. I could see it in his eyes. He'd known. Maybe not all the details, but he'd known enough. "Interesting," I said, "because I have emails suggesting otherwise." I didn't, not really. But I had enough circumstantial evidence to make him sweat. And more importantly, I had the security camera footage of him and Vivian. "Julie, listen." "No," I cut him off. "You listen. I'm filing for divorce, and thanks to our prenup, I'm going to take you for everything." His face went white. "You can't. The prenup protects me." "It protects both of us," I corrected, "including clauses about infidelity and hidden assets." "You've been paying for Vivian's apartment, Marcus. That's a hidden asset you didn't disclose in our quarterly financial statements. And the security footage of you two together? That's infidelity." "We never actually, but doesn't matter. The prenup defines infidelity as emotional or physical betrayal." Your lawyer should have read it more carefully. I watched understanding dawn on his face. He'd been so confident, so sure he was smarter than me. In my first life, he'd been right, but not this time. You planned this, he whispered, from the beginning. I protected myself, I corrected. There's a difference. The divorce took 8 months. Marcus fought hard, but I had documentation for everything. The hidden accounts, the apartment lease, the connection to Patricia and Vivian's fraud scheme, the security footage, the violated prenup clauses. His lawyer tried to argue that my cookbook and restaurant were marital assets. My lawyer proved I'd developed both independently, using resources from before the marriage and during the marriage without any financial support from Marcus. In the end, I walked away with everything I'd brought in, plus half his liquid assets, plus the apartment he'd leased for Vivian, which I promptly sold. Patricia and Vivian both took plea deals. Patricia got 3 years, Vivian got 2. My father divorced Patricia while she was in prison and slowly started rebuilding his relationship with me. I'm sorry, he told me one night at the restaurant, my restaurant now. I was weak. I let them hurt you. You did, I agreed. But you're here now. That's what matters. The restaurant flourished under my management. I hired back the staff Patricia had fired, found better suppliers, and implemented new menu items based on my future knowledge of food trends. Within a year, we had a waiting list for reservations. My cookbook went into its 3rd printing. I was approached for a 2nd book, then a 3rd. Food Network wanted to discuss a show. I was becoming successful, not as Marcus's wife, not as someone's victim, but as myself. But I couldn't forget that final night in my first life. That terrible, painful death. And I couldn't forget the words Vivian had spoken. He always said your cooking was just okay. You tried too hard. It was desperate. 2 years after the divorce, Marcus tried to come back. His investment firm had taken a hit from the scandal, and he'd lost several major clients. He'd been forced to sell his house, our house from my first life, and downgrade significantly. He showed up at my restaurant one Friday night. Prime dinner service, fully booked. He didn't have a reservation. I'm sorry, the host told him. We're completely booked for the next 3 months. Tell Julie I'm here, he said confidently. She'll make room. The host came to find me in the kitchen. I was in my element, running a brigade of talented chefs, creating dishes that would be photographed and shared thousands of times on social media. Marcus Chen is here, she said. He says you'll make room for him. Every chef in the kitchen looked up. They knew the story, not all of it, but enough. They knew he was my ex-husband. They knew it had ended badly. Tell him we're fully booked, I said without looking up from the fish I was plating. No exceptions. He's insisting. Then call security. She hesitated. He says he just wants to talk to you. He says he misses your cooking. The kitchen went silent. I set down my tweezers and turned to face her. Tell Mr. Chen, I said clearly so everyone could hear, that I don't cook for people who don't appreciate it, and I definitely don't cook for people who called my food terrible. I never said those exact words in this timeline, but I knew he'd said them in my first life, probably during our marriage when he'd grown bored with my desperate attempts to please him. In this life, he never got the chance. The host returned to deliver my message. Through the kitchen window, I watched Marcus's face cycle through emotions, shock, anger, humiliation. He left without causing a scene. I went back to work. 5 years after my rebirth, my life was unrecognizable from my first timeline. I owned 3 successful restaurants, had published 5 cookbooks, and was in development for my own streaming cooking show. My father had fully recovered from Patricia's betrayal and was now a partner in my business. I'd also started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I was learning to trust again, to let people in. I was learning that not everyone was Marcus. One evening, a new customer requested to meet the chef. This happened occasionally, usually food enthusiasts or critics. I came out of the kitchen in my whites, expecting another compliment or photo request. Instead, I found a man about my age, Chinese-American like me with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Chef Zhang, he said, that was extraordinary, the best meal I've had in years. Thank you, I said professionally. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm a food critic, he continued on. But I'm here personally tonight, not professionally. I've been following your career since your first cookbook. The way you blend traditional techniques with modern innovation, it's masterful. We talked for an hour. His name was David Lynn, and he'd grown up in a restaurant family too. He understood the pressure, the passion, the constant drive to create something perfect. Can I ask you something? He said as the evening wound down. Your short rib dish, the one with star anise and bone marrow. It's on the menu, but you never make it. I stiffened. How do you know? I've been here 6 times, he admitted. Always on a Friday. I keep ordering it, hoping you'll be the one to prepare it, but it's always one of your sous chefs. They do an excellent job, but I can tell it's not your hand. I looked at this man, this stranger who'd somehow noticed what no one else had. The dish was on my menu because it was good, because it showcased my skills, but I'd never made it myself since my rebirth. I'd taught my team to prepare it perfectly, but I couldn't bring myself to stand over that stove, to smell those specific spices, to create that specific reduction. It reminded me too much of dying. It was someone's favorite, I said finally. Someone who didn't deserve it. David nodded slowly. Ah, that person. That person, I agreed. Then he was a fool, David said simply, but son, because anyone who had you cooking for them and didn't appreciate it is the biggest fool in the world. Something in my chest loosened. It's just food, I said, but my voice was soft. No, David said, it's not. Food is love, care, attention, and time. Food is how we show people they matter. If someone rejected that from you, they rejected you. I blinked back sudden tears. In all these years, no one had understood. No one had put into words what I'd felt that night I died. But you know what? David continued. You're still here. Still cooking. Still creating. You didn't let him take that from you. That takes strength. I died, I whispered. Then, realizing what I'd said, I tried to backtrack. I mean, metaphorically. I felt like I died. But David just smiled, like he understood something deeper. Then you were reborn, and look at you now. David and I started dating slowly. He never pushed, never demanded. He appreciated my cooking, but never expected it. When I cooked for him, and I did eventually, it was because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated. 6 months into our relationship, I made him the short rib dish. My hands shook as I prepared the reduction, but David was there in the kitchen with me, not hovering but present, supporting. This is amazing, he said after the first bite. But you know what would make it even better? I tensed. What? Nothing. It's perfect exactly as it is, just like you. I laughed, the tension breaking. That was corny. It was, he agreed cheerfully. But it's true. We ate together, and it tasted different than I remembered. Better, lighter, not weighed down by resentment and desperate hope. I want to tell you something, I said as we finished. Something impossible. And I told him. Everything. My first life. My death. Waking up young again with all my memories. Planning my revenge. Saving myself. I expected him to think I was crazy. To make excuses and leave. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you for telling me, he said. That must have been terrifying, all of it. You believe me? I believe that something happened to you, he said carefully. Whether it was exactly as you described or something your mind created to process trauma, does it matter? You survived, you saved yourself, you're here. It was the perfect answer. 8 years after my rebirth, I stood in my flagship restaurant's kitchen, preparing for the biggest night of my career. A Michelin inspector was dining with us, and I was determined to earn our first star. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. Patricia was released today. Vivian gets out next month. Thought you should know. I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no anxiety. They were irrelevant to my life now. Another message, this one from an unknown number. Julie, this is Marcus. Can we talk? I've been in therapy. I understand now what I did wrong. I'd like to apologize properly. I deleted it without responding. David came into the kitchen, dressed for service. We'd gotten engaged last month, but we hadn't set a date. We were in no rush. We had time. Ready? He asked. Ready, Nitzel, I confirmed. The service was flawless. Every dish perfect, every flavor balanced, every presentation stunning. I worked with my team like a conductor leading an orchestra, and they responded beautifully. The Michelin inspector ate slowly, taking notes. I didn't watch, I had work to do, but I felt the energy in the room, the electricity of something special happening. Afterward, David and I walked home together through the city streets. My city now, full of possibilities instead of pain. I'm proud of you, he said. Not just for tonight, but for everything. For saving yourself, for building this life. I had an unfair advantage, Hamas, I said with a smile. I knew what was coming. No, David said seriously. Han, you had information, what you did with it. That was all you. You could have just avoided Marcus and lived a safe, small life. Instead, you built an empire. It's not an empire, I protested. It's 3 restaurants and some cookbooks. 5 cookbooks, he corrected, soon to be 6, plus the streaming deal, the consulting business, the culinary school you're planning. That's an empire, Julie. I leaned into him as we walked. He was right. I had built something extraordinary, not for revenge, that was just the beginning. I'd built it for me. We reached our apartment, a beautiful space in a historic building, nothing like the sterile suburban house Marcus had chosen in my first life. This place was warm, filled with art and books and evidence of life being lived fully. Do you ever regret it? David asked as we got ready for bed. The revenge, I mean. Do you wish you'd just walked away? I thought about it. About Patricia in prison, Vivian's criminal record, Marcus's damaged reputation and reduced circumstances. About my father's restaurant saved, my own success, my freedom. No, I said honestly, they deserved what happened to them. They were cruel and predatory. I just accelerated their downfall. And if you hadn't been reborn, David asked, if you'd just had one life and it was the first one? The question haunted me. If I'd lived and died in that first timeline, none of this would exist. Marcus would have divorced me eventually, taken everything and moved on. Patricia and Vivian would have destroyed my father. I would have died in obscurity, unmourned except as a cautionary tale. Then I would have wasted my life, I said softly, and I'm grateful every day that I got a second chance. That night, I dreamed of my first death. The pain, the burning, the regret. But when I woke, David was beside me and sunlight was streaming through our windows, and I could hear the city waking up below. I got up and went to the kitchen. Not to cook Marcus's favorite meal, I'd never make that for him again, or for anyone else. Instead, I experimented with a new dish, something I'd been planning. A dessert that combined traditional Chinese flavors with French techniques, representing old and new, east and west, death and rebirth. I was testing the recipe when David emerged, sleepy and smiling. What's that? Something new, I said. Want to try? He tasted it and his eyes widened. That's incredible. What is it? Phoenix cake, I said. Made from ashes and reborn in flame. Very poetic, he said with a grin. Also delicious. You should put it on the menu. I would, but first I had something else to do. 10 years after my rebirth, I received an invitation to a food industry gala. It was a major event, black tie, with everyone who mattered in attendance. I was receiving an award for my contributions to culinary innovation. Marcus would be there. I knew because his firm was a sponsor, clinging to relevance through association with more successful people. David offered to skip it with me. We can stay home, he said. Order pizza. Watch terrible movies. No, I said. I want to go. I've earned this. The gala was spectacular. I wore a custom gown, red like flame, like Rebirth. My father accompanied us, proud in his tuxedo. My restaurants had made him wealthy again, had given him purpose. He was thriving. When my name was called for the award, I walked to the stage through applause. I accepted the trophy, a beautiful glass sculpture of a phoenix, and stepped to the microphone. Thank you, I said. This award means more to me than you know. 10 years ago, I was just a line cook with a dream. I had people tell me I'd never succeed, people who thought I was only good for cooking someone else's favorite meal, for serving someone else's ambitions. I saw Marcus in the crowd. He was at a back table, looking older, harder, alone. But I learned something important, I continued. You can't live for other people's approval. You can't cook to please someone who doesn't appreciate you. You have to create for yourself first. And if you do that, if you're authentic and excellent and true to your vision, the right people will appreciate it. The audience applauded. I looked directly at Marcus as I spoke my next words. Fine. To everyone who ever called my cooking terrible, thank you. You taught me that I didn't need you. You taught me to value myself, and that lesson was worth every moment of pain. The applause grew louder. I raised my trophy, catching the light, letting it refract into 1,000 colors. This is for everyone who was underestimated, everyone who was told they weren't good enough, everyone who had to die to be reborn. We are phoenixes, all of us, and we are magnificent. I left the stage to a standing ovation. David was crying, my father was beaming, and Marcus was leaving through the side exit. I didn't watch him go. I was done watching Marcus Chen. The Michelin star came through, then a second one 2 years later. My streaming show launched to record viewership. The culinary school opened with a full roster of students. I taught them what I'd learned. Cook with passion, know your worth, and never, ever make anything for someone who doesn't appreciate it. David and I married in a small ceremony at the original restaurant, surrounded by food and friends and love. My father walked me down the aisle, and this time his tears were happy. I wore red again. Red for fire, for rebirth, for phoenix rising. Patricia died in prison. Health complications from poor living conditions. I felt nothing. Vivian tried to contact me after her release, wanting forgiveness or money or something. I never responded. She was a ghost from a life that no longer mattered. Marcus's firm went bankrupt during an economic downturn. He tried to pivot to consulting, but his reputation never recovered from the scandal with Patricia and Vivian. Last I heard, he was managing a mid-level chain restaurant in the suburbs, the kind of place that microwaves their signature dishes. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. His downfall wasn't my victory. My success was. 15 years after my rebirth, I stood in my kitchen. Not a restaurant kitchen this time, but the one in the home David and I had built together. Our daughter, May, was 7 years old, and she stood on a stool beside me, carefully whisking eggs for a cake. "Mama, why do we always cook together?" she asked. "Because cooking is how we show love," I told her. "And I want you to always know you're loved." "Did your mama teach you?" "She did," I said, thinking of my mother who died so long ago in both timelines. "She taught me that food is magic. It can heal or harm, bring people together, or push them apart. It's powerful." "I want to be a chef like you," May declared. "You can be anything you want," I told her. "Chef, doctor, astronaut, anything. As long as you promise me one thing." "What?" "Never cook for someone who doesn't appreciate it. Never give your gifts to people who don't value them. Your time, your talent, now your love, they're precious. Only share them with people who understand that." She nodded seriously, my solemn little girl who already showed signs of inheriting my palate and my passion. David came home as we were pulling the cake from the oven. "Something smells amazing," he said, kissing my cheek, then May's head. "It's a surprise," May announced, "for your birthday." "My birthday's not for 3 weeks," David laughed. "We're practicing," I explained. "Perfection takes time." We ate dinner together, the three of us, and it was nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and bread. Simple food made with love, shared with people who appreciated it. After May went to bed, David and I sat on our balcony looking out over the city lights. "Do you ever think about it anymore?" he asked. "The first timeline?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Usually when I'm very happy, like tonight. I think about how close I came to never having this." "Any regrets?" "Just one," I said. "I regret that version of me, the first me, never got to experience this happiness. She died thinking she was worthless, that her gifts didn't matter, that she'd wasted her life." "But you didn't waste it," David said softly. Even that first life wasn't wasted. It taught you everything you needed to know for this one. He was right. My first life had been my teacher, however brutal the lessons. It had shown me what happened when you lived for other people's approval, when you gave everything to someone who gave nothing back, when you let yourself be diminished. I wish I could go back and tell her, I said. Tell that girl in the kitchen making his favorite meal one last time that she deserved so much more, that she was talented and valuable and worthy of love. Maybe you just did, David said, pulling me close. Maybe every time you teach a student to value themselves, every time you tell May to never settle, every time you share your story, maybe you're telling her. I leaned into my husband's warmth and thought about all the versions of me that existed in the multiverse. The one who died in that kitchen, the one who was reborn with memories, and infinite others who made different choices, lived different lives. I hope so, I whispered. I hope somewhere, somehow she knows she was enough. She was always enough. 20 years after my rebirth, I was 43 years old and at the peak of my career. 3 Michelin stars at my flagship restaurant, 7 cookbooks, a successful streaming network of cooking shows, and the culinary school that was now producing some of the industry's most promising young chefs. But more than that, I had peace. I received an email one Tuesday afternoon. The sender's name made me pause. Marcus Chen. Subject: one last thing. I almost deleted it, but curiosity, or maybe a need for closure, made me open it. Julie, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't deserve a response, but I need to say it anyway. I've been in therapy for 8 years now. Real therapy, not the kind you go to so you can tell people you're working on yourself. And I finally understood what I did to you. I didn't just fail to appreciate your cooking. I failed to appreciate you. Your time, your effort, your love. I treated you like a service provider, not a partner. I took everything you gave and demanded more, all while giving nothing back. The worst part is I did it consciously. I knew what I was doing. Vivian and I, we laughed about it, about how eager you were to please, how easy you were to manipulate. We thought we were so clever. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because you deserve to hear the truth. You were never the problem. Your cooking was never terrible. It was extraordinary. I said those things because I wanted to keep you small, keep you uncertain, keep you focused on pleasing me instead of building your own life. I see now what you've become without me, and I understand what I destroyed in my first marriage to you. Wait, that doesn't make sense. We were only married once. Sorry, I've been having strange dreams lately. Dreams where we were married longer, where everything went differently, where something terrible happened. Never mind, I'm rambling. What I mean to say is, I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better. You always deserved better. I won't contact you again, Marcus. I read the email 3 times. The strange part about dreams, about a first marriage, it sent chills down my spine. Did he somehow remember, or was it just guilt manifesting in strange ways? It didn't matter. I closed the email without responding. Not because I was still angry. Anger had burned out years ago, leaving only ash and new growth, but because he was right. He didn't deserve a response. He didn't deserve any more of my time or energy. I had a daughter to pick up from school, a husband to have dinner with, and a new recipe to test for my next cookbook. I had a life that was full and beautiful and entirely mine. Marcus Chen was finally, truly, just a ghost from my past. May grew up surrounded by food and love. She chose to become a doctor, not a chef, but she carried the lessons I'd taught her. She cooked for friends and family with joy, never with obligation. She chose partners who appreciated her, who added to her life rather than diminishing it. You raised her well, David said on our college graduation day. We raised her well, I corrected. My father lived to see her graduate medical school. He died peacefully in his sleep at 78 in the apartment above the original restaurant, surrounded by pictures of family and success. At his funeral, I cooked his favorite dishes, and we celebrated a life that had been hard but ultimately redeemed. Patricia's name was never mentioned. She was truly erased from our family story. I continued cooking, teaching, building my empire, and David was right. It was an empire, grew, but it never consumed me. I'd learned the balance between passion and obsession, between creating and living. On my 50th birthday, my staff surprised me with a party at the flagship restaurant. Current and former students came from around the world. Fellow chefs, critics, food writers, and industry leaders filled the dining room. David stood to make a toast. 27 years ago, he said, I walked into a restaurant and had the best meal of my life. But the real gift wasn't the food. It was meeting the woman who made it. Julie Jiang is many things: chef, teacher, entrepreneur, mother, wife. But most importantly, she's a phoenix. She rose from ashes to become a beacon of light for everyone who's ever been underestimated or undervalued. To Julie, may you continue to burn bright. Everyone raised their glasses. I looked around the room at all these people whose lives I'd touched, who'd touched mine in return, and I felt the weight of 2 lifetimes settle into something like wisdom. I stood to respond. Thank you all for being here, for being part of my journey. I want to share something with you tonight, something I've never spoken about publicly. The room quieted. Even David looked surprised. 27 years ago, I was in a very dark place. I felt worthless, trapped, like my life was over before it had really begun. And in a way, it was. That version of me, the girl who didn't know her own worth, she had to die so this version could be born. I saw understanding dawn on faces around the room. So many people here had their own stories of transformation, their own metaphorical deaths and rebirths. I learned something from that death. You can't cook for someone who doesn't appreciate it. You can't live for someone who doesn't value you. You can't pour your gifts into a void and expect fulfillment in return. I looked at David, at May, who was home from her medical residency for my birthday, at my students and colleagues and friends. But when you find the right people, the ones who see you, really see you, then cooking for them, creating for them, living alongside them becomes the greatest joy. That's the secret I want to share with all of you. Be selective with your gifts. Save them for people who deserve them, and never, ever settle for less than full appreciation. The room erupted in applause. May was crying, David was beaming, and I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced in my first life. We feasted that night on dishes I'd created over the years, each one representing a different phase of my journey. The Phoenix cake was there, of course, now a signature dessert, but also simpler things, my mother's recipes, reimagined, my father's favorites, perfected. Dishes inspired by my travels, my students, my family, everything except Marcus's favorite meal. That recipe existed only in my memory now, and that's where it would stay, a relic of a life I'd escaped, a dish I'd never make again. At 60, I began the process of stepping back from the day-to-day operations of my restaurants. I promoted talented chefs from within, gave them ownership, stakes, and watched them flourish. The culinary school was thriving under new leadership. My last cookbook had been published to critical acclaim. I wasn't retiring, I'd never fully retire, but I was making space for the next generation. One afternoon, while organizing my office, I found an old notebook from my first year of Rebirth. My handwriting was frantic on these pages, full of plans and contingencies and desperate strategies for revenge. Reading it now, I saw a young woman who'd been so focused on not repeating her mistakes that she'd almost forgotten to live. Yes, I'd saved myself. Yes, I'd gotten justice. But the real victory wasn't destroying my enemies. It was building something beautiful from the rubble. I burned the notebook in the fireplace of our home. David found me watching the pages curl and blacken. "What was that?" he asked. "The past," I said simply. "I don't need it anymore." He sat beside me and we watched the fire together. We'd grown old side by side, our hair graying, our faces lined with laugh marks in life. We'd built something real and lasting. "Do you think she's at peace now?" David asked. "That first version of you?" I thought about the girl who died in a kitchen, choking on her own blood and broken dreams, about how much pain she'd carried, how little joy she'd known. "I think," I said slowly, "that she gave everything so I could have this. She suffered so I'd know what to avoid. She died so I could be reborn. In that way, maybe we're not really two different people. Maybe we're the same person, just evolved. Like a phoenix, David said softly. Like a phoenix, I agreed. At 70, I was diagnosed with cancer. Treatable, the doctors said, but aggressive. I underwent treatment with the same determination I'd brought to everything else in my life. May, now a successful oncologist herself, was part of my care team. You're going to beat this, Mom, she said fiercely. You're the strongest person I know. I did beat it, but the experience changed something fundamental in me. I'd been reborn once before, given a second chance at life. Now I'd been given a third chance, and I understood that chances, however many you got, were finite. I wrote one final book, not a cookbook this time, but a memoir. I told the truth, or as close to it as I could without sounding insane. I wrote about toxic relationships, about finding your worth, about the death of who you were and the birth of who you could become. I wrote about Marcus, though I didn't use his real name, about Patricia and Vivian and my father's weakness, but I also wrote about redemption and growth and the power of second chances. The book was titled Never Again, One Woman's Recipe for Rebirth. It became my bestseller. I received thousands of letters from readers who'd seen themselves in my story. People trapped in bad marriages, toxic families, soul-crushing jobs, people who felt like their lives were over. I answered as many as I could. You don't need to die to be reborn, I wrote back again and again. You just need to choose yourself. Choose yourself fiercely and completely. The rest will follow. At 83, I was in the kitchen of the original restaurant, now a culinary landmark, teaching one final class. My hands shook slightly with age, but my knife skills were still sharp, my palate still precise. The secret to great cooking, I told my students, isn't technique or ingredients or even talent. It's knowing who you're cooking for and why. A young woman in the back raised her hand. She reminded me of myself at that age, uncertain, eager, full of potential she didn't yet recognize. What if you're cooking for someone who doesn't appreciate it? She asked. Like, what if you love cooking but your family just sees it as a free meal service? The other students laughed, recognizing the situation. But I didn't laugh. Then you stop, I said firmly. You stop cooking for them. You save your gifts for people who deserve them. But their family. Family should appreciate you most of all, I interrupted. Blood relation doesn't entitle anyone to your labor, your love, or your gifts. If they can't value what you bring to the table, then don't set a place for them. The room went silent. It was harsh advice, maybe. But it was true. However, I continued, softening slightly, sometimes people don't know how to appreciate something until it's gone. So you can set boundaries, cook for yourself, invite them to join you on your terms, and if they still don't appreciate it, then you have your answer. The young woman nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. After class, she approached me privately. Can I tell you something? She asked nervously. Of course. I'm in a relationship with someone who criticizes everything I make. He says he's trying to help me improve, but it doesn't feel like help. It feels like he's trying to make me small. My heart ached for her, for all the young women who found themselves in the situation I'd escaped. What's his favorite meal? I asked. She told me. Something elaborate, time-consuming, expensive. Here's what you do, I said. Tonight you make yourself the most beautiful, delicious meal you can imagine. Just for you. You set one place at the table. You light a candle. You pour yourself wine or tea or whatever you love. And you eat alone, savoring every bite. And if he asks why he's not included, you tell him the truth. This meal is for someone who appreciates your cooking. When he's ready to be that person, he can join you. She left with tears in her eyes and determination in her posture. I never found out what happened with her relationship, but 2 years later, I saw her name in a prestigious culinary magazine. She'd won an award for innovative vegetarian cuisine. In the interview, she said, I finally learned to cook for myself first. Everything else followed from that. Clipped the article and put it in my journal. Another phoenix risen from ashes. David died when I was 85 and he was 87, peacefully in our bed with me holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for being worth choosing," I whispered back. The grief was enormous, all-consuming, but it was clean grief, honest grief, not the complicated, poisonous grief of my first life's death. I mourned because I'd lost someone who'd enriched my life, not because I'd wasted my life on someone unworthy. May took care of me in the weeks after, making sure I ate, slept, continued living. "He wouldn't want you to give up," she said. "I'm not giving up," I assured her. "I'm just adjusting." I sold most of my business interests, keeping only the original restaurant. It was managed by former students now, but I still visited weekly, teaching occasional classes, maintaining the legacy. On what would have been David's 88th birthday, I made his favorite meal. Not Marcus's elaborate short ribs, I'd kept my vow never to make that again. But David's favorite. Simple roast chicken with herbs, crispy potatoes, and a green salad. Food that tasted like home and comfort and love. I set 2 places at the table. I poured 2 glasses of wine, and I ate slowly, remembering every meal we'd shared, every conversation, every moment of appreciation and joy. "You were the best thing that came from my rebirth," I said to his empty chair. "Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for loving me exactly as I was." The apartment was quiet except for the sounds of the city outside. My city, where I'd built my empire and my life, where I'd transformed from victim to victor, from broken to whole. At 90, I gave my final interview to a journalist writing a retrospective on my career. We sat in the original restaurant, surrounded by photos documenting decades of success. "Do you have any regrets?" the journalist asked. I thought about it carefully, about Marcus and Patricia and Vivian, about my father's weakness and my mother's early death, about the first life I'd lived and lost, and the second life I'd seized with both hands. "I regret nothing," I said finally. Not the pain, not the betrayal, not even the death that led to my rebirth. It all taught me something essential. You have to know your worth. You have to protect your gifts, and you have to be willing to burn down the old life to build a new one. "That's a harsh philosophy," the journalist observed. "Life is harsh," I countered, "but it's also full of possibility. You can be broken, or you can be a phoenix. The choice is yours. And if someone reading this is in the situation you were in, trapped, undervalued, desperate," I looked directly into the camera they were using for supplemental video. "Stop cooking his favorite meal," I said clearly. "Whatever form that takes in your life, stop giving your gifts to people who don't appreciate them. Stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces too small for you. Stop accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole feast." I paused, making sure every word landed. "You are worthy. Your time is valuable. Your love is precious. Your gifts are rare. Don't waste them on people who treat them as obligations rather than treasures. And if you have to burn down your whole life to save yourself, burn it down. You can rise from the ashes. I'm living proof." The interview went viral. The video clip was shared millions of times, always with the same theme: stop cooking his favorite meal. It became a rallying cry. Women leaving bad relationships, quitting exploitative jobs, cutting off toxic family members, they all used the phrase. "I'm done cooking his favorite meal," they'd post, and everyone understood. I'd given them permission to choose themselves, just as I'd done all those years ago. I died at 93 in my sleep, in the apartment overlooking the city. May found me the next morning, peaceful and smiling. My funeral was held at the flagship restaurant. Hundreds attended, former students, colleagues, readers, people whose lives I'd touched in ways large and small. They served food from my cookbooks, dishes I'd created over a lifetime of cooking. Everything except one recipe. Everyone who knew my story understood the omission. May gave the eulogy. "My mother taught me many things," she said, her voice strong despite her tears. "How to cook, how to work, how to build something meaningful. But the most important lesson was this: know your worth, and never settle for less than you deserve." She lived 2 lives, May continued, and some people in the audience looked confused, while others nodded knowingly. She died once and was reborn once and taught us all that we can be reborn too. Not literally, though she might have argued otherwise, but metaphorically. We can all rise from our own ashes. We can all become phoenixes. She raised a glass. To Julie Zhang, who taught us to never cook for those who don't appreciate it. To my mother, who chose herself and taught me to do the same. To the phoenix who showed us all how to fly. To the phoenix, the crowd echoed. They buried me next to David under a tree we'd planted together decades ago. The headstone read, Julie Zhang Chef, Teacher, Phoenix. She chose herself. Years after my death, the restaurant industry established the Julie Zhang Award for Culinary Excellence and Personal Integrity. It's given annually to chefs who demonstrate not just skill, but also the courage to value themselves and their work. The culinary school I founded continues to thrive, teaching technique but also self-worth. Every student learns my cardinal rule: never cook for those who don't appreciate it. My memoir is still in print, still changing lives. Young women read it and find the courage to leave bad situations. They learn that they can save themselves, that they don't need to wait for rescue. And sometimes, late at night in the original restaurant, staff members swear they smell star anise and wine reduction. They joke that it's my ghost, but they're not quite joking. They say the smell appears when someone in the kitchen is being treated poorly, undervalued, taken for granted. It's a reminder: choose yourself. Choose yourself fiercely. Choose yourself always, because somewhere in another timeline, another life, there's a version of you dying in a kitchen, wasted and mourned and forgotten. Don't be that version. Be the phoenix. Rise.